here's our sangha for this time. So I've spent the last few weeks very quietly rethinking what it means to be trauma responsive in this moment. And as I framed out what I thought were the most important things that I could share today, it was really striking to me how different so much of what just a few months ago uh, I would have shared in our trauma responsive training, how much has changed. It's um, it's a growing, moving, evolving moment. But there are, as so many of you already spoke to, so many things that we can um, wrap our hearts and our bodies and our breath around for ourselves and for everybody around us. And so today, my mission is to try and put tools, actual experience tools around the ideas so that we can all have some kind of a practice for each different aspect of where we or people we love might be at, and how we can, really get into our breath and our bodies to get to it. I have a friend who teaches trauma responsive work, and he's a Buddhist, and he sent out his newsletter, and he was like, the time for armchair practices is done. Now is the time for all of us to get in it. So we're really going to get in it today. So as I review, a lot of you have been in the United We Om training, but I don't know about you, but every time I review this material, I hear it freshly and I take a new understanding from it, particularly in this moment where everything feels really new. So I just want to go back to foundation, which is in thinking about and seeing all of the social media posts and shares of like Harvard says everybody should do yoga during this time. Have we seen the everybody says meditate, except I forget who shared. It might have been Sylvia. I really resonated with when she said, I'm a meditator and I'm really struggling. Anybody else had moments like that where like, I know I should, but I'm really struggling? Yeah. So I think the really important thing is that I feel that we have to kind of have a new structural approach together as a community about what it means to interface with this level of stress response and traumatic response, in terms of a yoga and breathing and mindfulness community. So I've framed it out a little bit. And the first thing that I want to share is, in my trying to put together my thoughts, the image, the story that kind of started to unfold for me. And I think it's a really good narrative for us all to bring with us into our everyday. I feel like when societies and cultures meet times of great stress, storytelling becomes really important. And for me, this moment that we're in is The Wizard of Oz. And it was my daughter, Faye, who's now 5's favorite movie for about 2.5 years. So I think I've seen it about 500 times. And as I was writing my notes and where I kind of thought we should begin and where we should go, this idea to me of Dorothy and her journey, it felt really relevant. And I believe that that is the journey that we are all now on together. There's an idea in traumatic response, and we'll talk about what that means, or in a great stress response, where we find ourselves in a world that we no longer recognize. And we find ourselves feeling, in many ways, alone there. And the journey of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, in some strange divine way, really speaks to this idea of wanting to find our way home. And what's beautiful about the system and the teachings of yoga is that whenever I feel really lost, all I have to do is like open up the Bhagavad Gita or the Yoga Sutras, and I'm reminded that human beings have been living and moving through traumatic response and stress response since any of us could record it, and before then. We'll talk in a moment about why that is, but it doesn't have to be complicated. It's really simple, and the teaching of yoga is very much about how we arrive back home to who we really are. And in this moment, all of us are separate Dorothys, having spun ourselves around in a twister, landed, and some of us may be feeling like we haven't even landed, like we're still in the middle of a twister, and to find ourselves on the other side of that, and how can we access all the wisdom from yoga to start to find our way back home. And I believe that up until this point, the idea of trauma responsiveness that I feel that has been really prevalent is an idea of neutral, or an idea of emptying. And I feel that now another thing we're really going to talk about today is the intersection of not just neutral, but joyful and full of love, and not just empty, but really full and connected. And I think that that is an element that we really all have to add now to our understanding of what it will mean for all of us to heal from this. Are we all good with that very big umbrella summary? Okay, amazing. So let's start with humans, which we all are. And let's start with why yoga as the system knows already where we all are, because humans have been there many, many times. So when we honor our ancestry, and we understand and remember, side note, if you're home watching a lot of television, there's some really great documentaries about chimpanzees. And if you want to just like remember who you really are in a lot of ways, I highly recommend watching a documentary on chimpanzees. So when we remember that we really are animals, monkeys, to a large extent, and that's where we evolved from, it can teach us a lot about what our experience is and why stress and traumatic response exist and what they're like. So let's have for some of us, the first time we're hearing, for some of us, the 10th millionth time we're hearing. Let's talk about how we're wired for safety. So the most important thing to all human beings is a feeling that we are safe. Our nervous system, our bodies, and the way they wire into our organs and into our brain all evolved out of our need to be safe, which makes sense, because if we are, Matt always likes to share that if we are not able to keep ourselves alive from the saber-toothed tiger, then our species had no chance of survival. So our very most innate need is a need to feel safe. Now, our amazing body evolved in order to make sure that we were safe. And the part of our body that we'll talk about is the good old autonomic nervous system. So give me a head nod if you've heard about the autonomic nervous system. So the thing that for some of us is like a refresher and for some of us might be new information is the school of thought that we either have mobilization, fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system, or resting, digesting, parasympathetic nervous system is an oversimplification. For the interest of time, I'll just start from what it is, and we won't unpack what we've learned. We'll just start with an understanding. So the understanding is that our nervous system is actually set to full mobilization all the time. Does that surprise anybody? Which is to say, imagine that you were needing to drive your car. Sometimes you pulled over, but you needed to make sure you were safe. So anytime you pulled your car over to rest, to eat, to do anything like that, would you want to turn your car off, or would you want to leave your car running so that if you had to go, you could go? Does that make sense? So because we were living in an environment full of danger when we first evolved, the way that our autonomic nervous system evolved to function is sympathetic nervous system is like the gas pedal. When it is activated, a lot of us have been feeling this in our very own bodies a lot these days. Our heart starts to race, our breathing becomes quick and shallow, and all of our extra bodily functions like digestion, all of that stuff, it all gets set aside. Our muscles tighten, and we experience a huge adrenaline dump of cortisone and adrenaline. The purpose is when we sense danger, we have to be able to mobilize. We have to be able to mobilize before our minds can even process the idea of, does that look like a saber-toothed tiger? Have we all had the experience of walking along or sitting someplace and all of a sudden our body responds to like the stick that was across the sidewalk or the car that pulled out in front of us? And our body responded well before our mind was like, oh, that car is pulling out in front of me. I should probably turn. Have we all had that experience? That's the autonomic nervous system. So the gas pedal is actually always down. We don't even leave the car running. We're like 150 miles an hour pedal to the metal. That's the sympathetic nervous system. So how do we survive? How are we able to do things like rest, digest our food, bond? All of that is connected to the parasympathetic nervous system. The new learning is this, relatively new. There is an amazing nerve called the vagus nerve. It's our 12th cranial nerve, and it is the channel through which our parasympathetic nervous system taps the brake and sometimes pulls the emergency brake based on our experience moment to moment of our level of safety in our environment. The vagus nerve runs from our base of our cranium. It attaches to all of our facial features, our tongue, our inner ear, our vocal cords, our heart, our lungs. It goes through the very center of our diaphragm, interdiaphragmatic. Below our diaphragm, it connects to every organ of digestion, our intestines, all the way down to our sex organs, our sphincter, the whole thing. It's all running on the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve has two different aspects, and this is really important. From the diaphragm above is a vagus nerve that developed as we became mammals, and even more so as our mammalness became human. From interdiaphragmatic vagal up through all of our upper organs, heart, lungs, face, inner ear, throat, developed this really, Matt likes to say it's like a fiber optic cable, although now that probably dates me to being like 36. I'm sure now we'd say it's like 5G or something, although that has its own resonance. It's like the hottest technology in our body. And its job is to constantly send signals from our body, because remember, our body is actually the one sensing our safety, not our brain. That's why we slammed on the brake when the car pulled out before our brain knew anything was going on. This upper vagal is full of different, it's kind of like, the New York Magazine, they used to have those charts where like over here it was like positive and over here it was negative and down here it was like mobilized and here it was immobilized, and how close you were from one quadrant to the other. There's so much of a range of where you could be. Look up charts from New York Magazine. You'll see what I'm talking about. I'm sure they have a name. There's so much variety about how in danger am I? How much can I relax? Like, what are the people around me? From our diaphragm below is our ancient vagus. That is from our reptilian state of being. And what that lower part of our vagus, the dorsal vagal, is responsible for is the emergency brake. So when you see in a pet store all the different kinds of beings, you see that there are lizards and snakes. And if you walk up to the glass, what do? Or you tap on the grass, or you come upon a salamander in your backyard while you're gardening, or an earthworm. What do? They freeze. And then they feign death sometimes. Has anybody seen an animal do this, or an earthworm? If you're outside in your garden, you find an earthworm, pick it up and you'll see that it'll like freeze. If you pick it up, it'll just flop over like it's dead. And then if you put it back down in the ground, if you wait a little while, it will come back and it will go bloop, 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 bloop. So we have that inside of us. And that is an aspect of traumatic response and stress response that's really important to remember. So, overview of the vagal nerve. Our sympathetic nervous system is our gas pedal. It is always down. Without our vagus nerves conversation with our automatic nervous system, our heartbeat would be something like 120 beats per minute all the time. How does the vagus nerve tamp down and moderate our sympathetic nervous system? The easiest way to access it for us is our breath. Every time we take a breath through which our diaphragm moves, as we inhale, that pressure squeezes the part of our vagus nerve that runs interdiaphragmatic. And every time we fully exhale and our diaphragm snuggles back up towards our lungs, it releases the pressure on our vagus nerve. This is one of the really important ways that our physical body is constantly sending signals that are received by our brain about whether we are safe or whether there might be danger. In addition, our heart rate and the quality of our breath, our level of muscle tension, all of this information from our body is constantly being relayed back up to our brain. I'm safe, I'm safe. I'm not safe, I'm not safe. How are we doing? Give me a head nod if we're doing all right. Okay, are there any questions? Does anybody want to raise their blue hand or their actual hand? Awesome. Great. Okay. So stress response is appropriate to our evolution, right? If we are out in a field and all of a sudden we saw a really dangerous animal, it would be appropriate that we would pull off the brake pedal and our sympathetic response would pull forward, dump adrenaline into our body, accelerate our heart rate so we had oxygen for our muscles, get our heart pumping, and help us mobilize to get away or confront if we needed. What we were already seeing in our culture, however, has been a chronic stress response or a prolonged stress response, which means we become habituated to feeling the feeling of go, 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 go. Do we all have that experience or know people that have that experience? Yeah. So when our autonomic nervous system becomes dysregulated, our sympathetic nervous system is always leading. It's always dumping those hormones into our body. It's always, always telling us there's danger, I'm not safe, there's danger, I'm not safe. So I would say that's a baseline for most of our culture coming into this current moment. So let's add on top of what we could say would be a norm of chronic stress response, a traumatic response. So the thing about trauma, which is really, really important, I think, in this moment to remember particularly, is that there really isn't any such thing as a trauma, but there is such thing as a traumatic response. And I think that maybe a lot of us are experiencing this with our own social circles. There are a lot of people in this moment who have seen this pandemic as something that was no big deal, and then some that have really been shaken by it, and that changes day by day. So the description of an event that has the potential to invoke a traumatic response is that it was unstoppable, it was unexpected, and we had no control. Any event at all, and they're really on the scale of traumatic response, there is no they're really, we can't rank them by how large or small we might perceive them to be. They all have the potential to have a great impact in our minds and our bodies. Is an event that was unexpected, unstoppable, and we had no control. Now, whether somebody has a traumatic response to an event has a lot to do with so many different parts of ourselves. So it could have to do with our past life experiences and how we perceive an event. And it could have to do, in addition, with the state that our nervous system is already in. And so many other things. What leads to a traumatic response from one individual to another is so unique to a human being. So what happens in a traumatic response is that now we have the rewiring of our nervous system in a very, very specific and deep way to tell us, our minds, from our bodies, I am unsafe. And in addition to the I am unsafe, we have this other aspect, which we'll call a trauminders. And this is when any thought, sound, thing that you see has the ability to put you in real time back into the feeling you had when you originally experienced the event that felt traumatic to you. So this is really important because going forward, there's a lot of things we're going to talk about that that have to do with yoga that are really important, that have the possibility of being a trauminders for people. So the best way I could describe a trauminders is when you're driving your car and you start thinking about something, you have a memory, and then all of a sudden you're 20 minutes down the road, you're halfway home and you have no idea how you got there. Has anybody had that experience? You just go out of that reality and your body is moving through the world. Your body is driving the car. Your body is driving you where you're going, but you were not there. You were back having that conversation you had with that person and going through it in your head. And you were, so that's kind of a great way of understanding what it is to be trauminded if you've never experienced a traumatic reminder. All right. Are there any questions? No. All right, let's get into some good practice. So the only other thing about trauma that I want to mention is so much about what a lot of us are experiencing, whether we know to acknowledge it or whether we don't, or the people we love, falls into the wheelhouse right now of a traumatic response, from being agitated to having mood swings, inability to sleep, and nightmares, fatigue, all of these different things that we're seeing in our culture and that people that we love are going to experience, and that people that we might share yoga with or other things are going to experience, all come back to the core of a dysregulated nervous system. So there are different ways that we might react and respond to a traumaminder or an event that might be traumatic to us. Some people, what happens is their gas pedal goes down, sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and then parasympathetic becomes dysregulated. And these are our moments where we feel like we have to. I hear a lot of people right now who are used to having really mellow practices being like, I don't know, I just ordered a Peloton bike. I don't know why. I just can't sit still. Or like, I started running, or like lifting weights. And this is an appropriate, wise reading of the fact that our body has been mobilized, that this gas pedal going down is telling our body, we need to go, we need to go. This is called hyperarousal. This is the side of traumatic response that is like agitation, anger, and rage, distraction, all of those feelings of like that we can't settle in. Those are a lot of time connected to hyperarousal. Most people experience hyperarousal as their response to stress or a traumatic event. The other side of this is this ancient parasympathetic we talked about. Some people, their bodies pull the emergency brake. Their dorsal vagal kicks in, and in order to protect them from what the body perceives to be an unbearable amount of stress or pain, their body turns off their feelings of interaction with their own physical experience. And, you know, this is when you see the gazelle and the lion catches the gazelle and on the nature channel, and it just goes limp, but it's still alive. And it's just like, it gives up. It runs, gas pedal, but then when it perceives there's no escape, the body does a really humane thing, which is pulling the dorsal vagal, disassociates us with our bodies, sends our pain threshold through the roof, and just kind of shuts us out of the present moment. This is hypoarousal. And this is where we start to get into even chronic hyperarousal starts to lead to the same territory that hypoarousal puts us in, which is depression, chronic fatigue. Both hyper and hypoarousal can lead to chronic pain, body tension, and body pain. But it's really simply our body's way to try and deal with what it perceives to be our lack of safety and imminent danger. So those are the big ideas that we'll take with us. So what do we do? What do we do? And there's a lot that we can do. There's so much that we can do. Actually, I'm going to struggle to fit it in. And that's the good news. That's the good news. So we'll go back to remembering Dorothy as our example for this particular moment in time. So also, I know, who was it that was my childhood specialist as well? Was that Christy? Yeah. So what we need to remember is Dorothy, yeah, it was Christy, good. So Dorothy not only was in a twister, which put her up in the air and then landed her down in a land that she didn't recognize all alone. But she also had previous trauma. I told you I've seen this movie and I've read this book. But that is the thing right now. Anybody that has childhood trauma, any kind of trauma previously, and again, we don't rank it big trauma, small trauma. Traumatic response is traumatic response. Also be aware are going to have this moment is going to compound things for them. It's called complex trauma, and we won't get into it, but that is there too. So as Dorothy lands in this foreign land, and works her way from that place back home, this to me is the analogy of where we all are, and the journey that we're all going to make together. And in yoga, there is a yellow brick road, and it's called the koshas. And it's all the layers of ourselves, starting from that physical terrain and traveling in and in and in. And in the koshas, home is in our heart. Home is always within us, just like Dorothy. So when we are now going to approach what about yoga, breathing, mindfulness can be healing, can help take us, our own selves home. And maybe then we can leave crumbs along the way so that others can. First, we have to meet ourselves with our most easy to access layer, and that is this physical body. So in this way, we just talked about how most of our physical bodies are in a state of hyperarousal. So meeting ourselves where we are, that means that if we are hyperaroused, it is not a good expectation of us for our own bodies or other people's bodies that they would be able to inhabit a space of a regulated nervous system where we're mobilized and we're moving, but we're relaxed. So this is where, and this is what I've been doing in my own practice, and I invite everybody that would like to try. I've been welcoming some Kriya movement into my practice. The reason being that what I feel that I do when I do this, we're all going to do it together, is I'm honoring my body's response that I'm to the fact that I'm not safe. I'm not telling you you're wrong. You're safe. Just calm down. Because as Bo was saying, the reason that yoga most of the time is much more effective than talk therapy is because what is dictating to us if we're safe or not? Somebody unmute yourself and tell me. Which is it? The body or the mind? Who's driving here?
The body.
The body. So we cannot logic ourselves out of a traumatic response or a stress response. Impossible. So whether you're feeling slightly hyper aroused now, or whether you find there are certain times of the day, or whether you catch the news and it sends you into this state, this is a really awesome Kriya, a movement that really shakes your whole body. I learned it from my first yoga teacher, Shiva Ray, my root teacher. And I would love if we would all try it together for 60 seconds. So here's the key. We're going to shake, right? We're going to shake our hands, our head, our arms. You can stand up and shake your legs. You can go, don't look at the camera if you want for a little while. The most important thing though in this is what allows it to be transitioning for us from hyper arousal to more regulated is our ability to keep our muscles relaxed and our breath deep and smooth. Because what we don't want to do is do some movements where we're really tense and our breath is really short. That is going to reinforce, oh my gosh, I'm running, there's danger, there's danger. What we're trying to do is say, thank you, body, for your appropriate response. Let's move some of that out. Let's let you mobilize so that we can regulate. Okay, so let's begin. Standing, you don't need to look at the camera. You can go step away, whatever feels good to you. And we're just going to start by shaking our hands. And then you can let that shake come into your arms. And you can let that shake come into your head. Maybe you shake your foot. Shake your leg. That's it. And nobody's watching you. I'm not watching you. So just let that shake come through as much of your whole body as you can. Keeping your breath really smooth, keeping your face, your jaw really relaxed, shaking, shaking, shaking. Beautiful. Just a few more breaths. Let your hips shake, let your big leg muscles shake. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And then just inhabit the space you are. Let your body just come to rest for a moment. Let your breath be how it is and just notice how your body feels now. Any sensations in your body, any change or any shift. Amazing. And then you can come back if you would like to your space. How was that for anybody? Is this a new practice for you? Thumbs up. Good. All right, thumbs up. So this is something that if you're teaching or if you're with children or you're with your own self, if you get the sense that the room is hyper aroused, agitated, unfocused, there's moods and all kinds of things, meet people where they are, meet yourself where you are, and allow for some kind of release of that energy that keeps muscles relaxed, breath smooth. So we're telling the body we're good. So after that, the next piece of meeting our physical body this is where I really feel like, we start with asana. And the reason why most people find this practice through asana is because this is the most easy to access part of our being. So this is going to be a bridge, this moment, from this first kosha, this anamaya, this body kosha, into the next kosha where we're heading because we want to regulate our energy and our breath. So we're going to explore some movement with our body that incorporates a slowing and a lengthening of our breath. And we'll get more into the breath in a moment. So in this practice, we're going to let our elbows bend and we're going to let our palms face towards the sky. Or just in any comfortable way. And now when we feel our breath is rising in, we're going to let our hands rise up towards the top of our lungs, towards our heart. As we breathe out, we're going to turn our palms and we're going to let our hands travel down towards our navel. You can explore this with the pace of your own breath. And notice how the breath is. And continue to invite a feeling that the breath really doesn't need much help from you. Really, what it needs you to do is step out of the way and let it be easy and smooth. And as we breathe in, feel all that's rising in the body. And as we breathe out, all that's grounding in the body. Now we're going to change to feel the other movements of our body. And as we breathe in, we're going to let our arms expand out to the side. So these are the movements of prana in the body, the vayus. And as we breathe out, we're going to let our hands come back in towards our heart. And again, with your own breath pace, in everything that's expansive, out all that is at your center, all that is your center. Just take a few more breaths. And as we breathe now, see if you can allow your breath to be what is leading the pace of your movement. Each breath so different from the one before. And then whenever you find an exhale, it feels like a good moment to pause. You can just let your Hands come to rest. Always with trauma responsive work, eyes can be open softly or closed, dependent on the minute, the day, changing all the time. And just notice any shift you feel from engaging with your body. All right. So we'll come back together. How is everybody's body, breath, mind feeling? Okay, good. So, what's really important to remember with all asana practices right now in a moment of high stress response and traumatic response is that the purpose, I believe, um, of asana now is this what's healing about asana and trauma, which is it allows us to feel our body in this present moment. And when we talk about yoga and what's healing about yoga for trauma, so much of it has to do with finding the present moment. Because in the present moment, the state that we call yoga, when we're fully absorbed in the present moment, 99.99999% of the time, we discover that we do have safety in that moment. And that so much of why we feel unsafe is in our mind, where we're going with our thoughts and our emotions and our pairing appropriate, what our brain thinks are appropriate emotional responses to things that remind us of other things. But in the present moment, we are okay. We're safe. We're as safe as we can be. So, the other really important thing about asana, our own practice of asana, or when we share it with other people, is the asana has to be asana that promotes relaxation, ease, presence. If we are teaching asana that's very strenuous, and folks are not able to have like really beautiful, slow, easy breath, we really are doing more harm than good in this moment. Like for a well-regulated nervous system, it's a health stress response is healthy. Like when we experience stress, we grow. It's healthy. When our stress response is out of coherence and out of alignment, and we're like, holy shit, put the gas down, danger, it's really not good medicine to ramp ourselves up more. Although many people feel that they want to go, they're like, I feel like I have to go, 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 go. So with asana, we have to walk that really fine line of giving our bodies an outlet for this stress response while knowing that our goal is to walk our parasympathetic back in so that we're back in harmony. So the other thing that is really a thing with our bodies and this current moment, and somebody mentioned, I think it was Leah, being alone. And the reason why our vagus nerve exists is because we discovered that unlike when we were in our reptilian moment, and we didn't, reptiles don't pair bond. All the snakes and lizards go find their own corner and they stay there and they mate and then they go away. But mammals discovered that we do so much better in groups, in pairs, in tribes. So our vagus nerve is what helped us be able to bond and communicate with each other, to do this amazing thing we do called neuroception, where our nervous system is always scanning other people's nervous systems. Are you safe? Sending signals. I'm safe. Are you safe? It's full of nuance. And so much about being a human being. What is home for us if we talk about finding our way home from being in a place we no longer recognize and being alone? I think the core elements to home for human beings from a yogic perspective are love, that our wisdom is in our heart, and that we're all connected, connection, and bonding. And when we want to punish somebody, when our justice system wants to punish somebody, they put them in solitary confinement. They remove them from the other humans. And it's one of the most detrimental things that can happen to a human being. And there are a lot of humans right now who are alone. And there are a lot of humans right now that, because they're experiencing a traumatic response, feel alone, might as well be alone, even though they might be in a room, in a house full of other people. So, this feeling of being alone doesn't necessarily only correlate to people that are physically alone. So, one of the things that we can do for ourselves and for the people in our lives is, if there's anybody in your house with you, a pet, a plant, any living thing, go be with it. Cuddle it. Our nervous system, our advanced vagus nerve is built so that we can cuddle. We can be immobilized and bonding. So anytime that you have the opportunity to cuddle somebody else or yourself, if you're sharing with students, or you're talking with people that are feeling alone, something that you can share with them that's really amazing is self-massage. This can just become a part of what yoga is right now, because we don't have our nervous systems to all be together in the yoga studio and regulate together. I don't think that you're experiencing as much regulation from my nervous system through the computer as we would if we were all sitting in a room together. So let's all just explore a little self-massage, just because we could all use it. So I really love to do self-massage on my feet. Morgan's gonna laugh. She always laughs. My feet are really dirty, so I'm always barefoot. I'm gonna show you my feet, and we can just start by just look at all the dirt on my feet, walking our hands up and down our feet, and just feeling the soles of our feet. And one of our wonderful teachers, Jafar, when he teaches that, he talks about noticing how you're touching your own body and just being aware of what that initial impulse was, how you touch your own body, and then just seeing if you can touch your own body with loving kindness, just soothing. Can change to the other foot. Just notice how the other foot feels. The temperature of your hands against your skin. Just getting to know the landscape of your feet. Beautiful. And then another way that we can bring more touch into our lives and the lives of the people that we love is just like this beautiful stroking thing that we can do, where we can like stroke our heads. We're going to talk about insomnia as one of the benchmarks of a really strong stress response or traumatic response. When I trained in Thai yoga massage, massaging your scalp, the Thai word for that is actually where the word shampoo comes from. And in Thai massage, people, when you have a client with insomnia, you rub their scalp. My teacher used to say very strongly, like, you want to mess up your hair. So this is another really, really good tool that we can offer, especially in the realm of ourselves when we can't sleep. Give yourselves a really strong scalp massage. All right, so those are ways that we also increase oxytocin in our body, serotonin in our body, all those hormones that are related to our parasympathetic nervous system coming back into regulation. And if we think about ourselves as babies, this is what we're programmed to be. You know, any baby animal or baby human, we come in and what we need is to be held and loved and feel connected. And there's a lot of studies on touch, babies and touch, humans, you know, grown up adults and touch, and how detrimental it is for us not to have touch. So if there's something you can share with yourself and others, as many ways as we can touch ourselves, we all can, find a way to do that safely. Any questions? Oh, Elisa. No, that's Bo.
Hey, what was the word that you used for our nervous system scanning other people's nervous systems?
Thanks, Bo. So neuroception is
Neuros.
it's what our nervous systems are constantly doing. Our bodies are constantly scanning our environment to decide whether we're safe or not. This happens every single second of every day. And it's why when you sometimes you find yourselves around a person and for some reason you can't explain, you just kind of tighten up and you kind of pull in. That is your body's nervous system feeling that the nervous system of somebody else poses danger, that somebody else is unsafe, whether they are or not. And we talk about this a lot in the United We Own training, because when somebody experiences a traumatic event, what starts to happen is that their nervous system starts to change the way that they express their safety. So, and this is a whole other amazing conversation about the vagal nerve, but when we experience a traumatic event, it changes the timbre of our voice. It can change the way that our facial expressions, it can cause like a flat facial expression. We can lose the range of human voice in our inner ear in favor of predator sounds like high sounds and low sounds. It changes a lot of things in us. And so we were programmed to see Bo on the savannah and to be able to make a decision really quickly about whether Bo is dangerous to me or not. And our bodies continue to do that, even though we like to think that that we don't all the time. So yes, we are constantly scanning for safety. This at the very end, we're going to talk about what we can do as service to the world as yogis, and neuroception is a big part of that. What we can do is we can regulate our own nervous system, because when our nervous system is regulated, we don't need to tell anybody that we are a safe person. Their bodies pick it up and they start to feel safer. And that doesn't have to be a verbal conversation. It's just the way that we're programmed. Great question. Thanks, Bill. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, so we start with the body. And then the next layer is pranamaya kosha. And this is our energy body. And it's our breath, but it's a lot more than our breath. But I do want to talk about breath. So in my work about trying to figure out how we are trauma responsive in this moment, I had a really sad realization that the one thing that we've always taught can help us regulate our nervous system more than anything else is now something that I think will probably also be a traumminder for most people, and that's breathing. So, the number one thing that we can do to access our own autonomic nervous system, our automatic nervous system, is the way in which we breathe, which we'll talk about in a second. Just because we're in this, I just want to say out in front that if anytime during this breathing work or any of these words make you feel a certain way, or you find yourself reacting in any way or feeling any emotions or anything like that, I want to honor that, we're acutely aware, whether consciously or not, that the pandemic that we're in right now affects our ability to breathe, and that there are a lot of people who are struggling with breathing. And whether you or I have had our own experience of that by the end of this, whenever that is, or people that we might be sharing practice with, somebody that they love might have had an experience with that. I think we need to be prepared that the language around breathing is going to need to accommodate what this moment is. And so I think that just noticing how we express, like, now let's take a deep breath. I think that we might find that we need to go very gently into conversation around the breath. Our sensations in our body and our ability to move through and beyond a traumatic response or a stress response, a trauminders, a feeling of like, I was feeling fine. And then my yoga teacher told me to take a deep breath. And all of a sudden I was so angry and I don't know, or whatever that is. There, with brain science and with yoga, I mean, we can move through it. And we'll talk about how to do that. But I just want to say that out in front before we even start talking about the breathing. So there are two different components to breathing that that are therapeutic in terms of bringing our nervous system back into regulation, building resiliency, through a stress response or a traumatic response. The first aspect is that the breathing be diaphragmatic. Can anybody put the puzzle pieces together about why diaphragmatic breathing that moves the diaphragm up and down, would help bring the parasympathetic nervous system back into regulation? Anybody want to unmute themselves and share or raise their hand?
The vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve runs through the center of the diaphragm. Remember that every time we breathe in, our diaphragm moves down. It fills our lungs with air. It squeezes the vagus nerve. As we breathe out, as our diaphragm rises, I should say, the breath is moved out of our lungs and it relaxes its tension on the vagus nerve. This is the most important tool. If there's a takeaway from today about how you can regulate yourself, accessing your diaphragm. A lot of us in yoga, we learned Uddiyana Bandha, pull your belly button up and back, and we locked our bellies off and did a lot of big rib breathing and big like upper chest breathing. Now is the time for what I call Buddha belly. Now is the time to let your belly soften as much as you can so that your diaphragm can move up and down. When our diaphragm locks around our vagus nerve and it doesn't experience that pulse, what it tells our brain and body is there's imminent danger. That locking on of the diaphragm is part of the sympathetic nervous system, pedal down, pedal to the metal, go, go, go. What we need in order for our body to be in coherence, so we need the stress, we need sympathetic or we would never get out of bed. And we need parasympathetic to allow us to bond and communicate and be relaxed, rest, restore, is this shift between squeeze and release. Particularly in a time of hyperarousal, release would be the one that we might want to put more emphasis on. In coherent breathing, we talk about starting with an even inhale and exhale because we never know if somebody is hypo-aroused, then lengthening the exhale even more might not be the best medicine. Best medicine might be even, come to neutral. But again, we were saying at the beginning, now is not a time for neutral, I don't think. Now is a time for like what is really happening. In the most cases, I'm hearing hyperarousal. So if you would like to, you can remain as you are. If you would like to lay on your back, feel free, or stand or change your position. If you've never done breathing on your back before, maybe before you go to sleep tonight, you can try this again lying on your back if you don't want to now. And really simply, you can place your hand right in the soft spot in between your two beautiful wings of your rib cage, one hand or two hands, whatever feels good. And you can let your gaze open softly or close. Just find an anchor point for your gaze. Just start to notice as your breath flows in and flows out easily and smoothly, what the movement around your diaphragm feels like. The action is as the muscle of your diaphragm pulls down to make the vacuum to fill the lungs, the other organs get compressed slightly, and that's why we feel this in our belly, per se. Great. And then you can stay in this space. You don't have to like come back to the computer for a moment. I just want to say that if you don't feel that you're having an easy time accessing belly breathing in your diaphragm, that's absolutely fine. It's totally okay. We all have moments like this. It doesn't mean anything other than that's where you are right now. It's definitely a symptom of a strong stress response, also. So now we're going to add in some coherent breathing. And if you found the movement of the arms helpful, you can return. I'm going to show the movement of the arms, get a little higher so you can see me. But if you're like, I'm feeling really good just using my mind for this, you can totally do that. So we're going to feel our exhale come. And as we inhale, we're going to count to 3. We're going to let the hands rise up. Turn the palms. We're going to exhale to 4, 2, 3, 4. Turn the palms. Inhale. 2, 3. Turn the palms. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. We're going to continue. You're going to find your own count depending on where you are today or at any given moment. If a longer breath count feels challenging, particularly those of us with anxiety or that are hyper aroused, that's okay. It's your body's appropriate response. And we're going to use the belly breathing and the lengthened exhale to start to send the message to our body that we are safe. And as you feel space to lengthen the count, you can. So as the parasympathetic nervous system starts to become a stronger part of the conversation, you may find that you can inhale to a count of 4, perhaps, and maybe exhale to a count of 5 or 6. Another layer that we can add in is as you inhale, whenever that happens, you can exhale through the mouth, aha. You can see how that feels a few times if that felt good to you. Breathing in through the nose and breathing out through the mouth. So in yoga, this feels like ujjayi breath, but it's not necessary to do it with the mouth closed. Do it with the mouth open. The vibration of the ujjayi breath activates the vagus nerve in the vocal cords and also helps to reinforce the message of safety and brings the parasympathetic nervous system back to the forefront. So the next time that you feel an exhale coming, you can allow that to be the exhale that relaxes your arms if your arms were moving. We can let our count drift away and notice the quality of the breath. With love and appreciation. And we can come back together again. Did anybody feel a shift in their body's ability to lengthen the breath, lengthen the exhale, or a change in the quality of the breath through the course of the breathing? Anybody? No? Yes?
when you said the you're in a safe, at one point you said something about safety. You are safe, and then try to exhale out to the count of 4, and then inhale. I I don't know. There was a turn for me.
Mm, it's good to know that a good cue for you is just telling yourself that you're safe.
Yeah, for sure.
Anybody else have anything? Bridget.
Yes. So the first breath you told us to take using the diaphragm, I don't even think my diaphragm was moving. And I noticed, wow, I'm absolutely not. First of all, laying down on my back, because I think my posture has been so forward rounded that laying down took me a couple of moments of shifting and actually letting my physical body relax and release into the ground. And then as we did it, I actually got to a place where I was inhaling for 5 and exhaling for 6, and could have probably lengthened it even more. So progressively, every single round, it seemed like it was like, okay, I'm there. And so it just took that time of round to let it happen. But it was interesting that I didn't even realize I wasn't using my diaphragm to breathe today.
Yeah, I hear you. Anybody else, raise your hand if you're like, yep, I've been there. Yeah, so this is good noticing for ourselves and as teachers, if we're accustomed to breathing really deeply and we sit down to do it and we can't, like, it's okay. Philip, I unmute.
Hi.
There you are.
Yeah, so I have a lot of like birds and squirrels running around out here, and lots of little leaf noises. And so I noticed, somewhere midway through how I'd feel that tightening like real deep in the core at those noises, even as I'm consciously acknowledging, letting go, acknowledging, letting go. It's sort of like the letting go kept them from building up when I had the awareness, and yet I was losing the breath. I was constantly, and I know it's squirrels, and I'm in my backyard, and it's a lovely day.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
yeah.
a good example, everybody, of like, what it looks like in real time to be a little extra hyper vigilant and to be more aware of, like, especially bird sounds or like really high pitched sounds and things like that, rumbles on the ground. It's totally normal, and I've experienced it too, to find ourselves like way more, or I should say, having a more difficult time letting sounds around us just be. Because the way our body works is that when we hear the sound, it goes to a particular part of our brain where our brain adds on its memories. It's trying to figure out, is this sound safe or not? Am I safe or not? And in a moment where we're hyper aroused, and in a stress response, our brain is working on overtime, attaching meaning and emotion to all of the stimulus around us. Yeah.
And at the same time, I felt I was envisioning kind of the vagus nerve, like just sort of running up the middle of me. And the idea it's kind of like the turning point where that animal response turns into a possible higher response right there at the diaphragm. And something about keeping that in focus let me, like, as my diaphragm moved, I noticed I was relaxing, because I have a challenge of constantly trying. Like, my mind is a very active mind, so it's like trying to relax me, and it keeps me going insane with its trying. Like, the mind isn't ever going to do it, and I like sort of, so yeah, that was a wonderful exercise. Thank you.
Awesome. And really awesome, wise, intuitive acknowledging and noticing on your part too. I love that. The diaphragm, I love the image of the diaphragm as a place of potential for accessing something else. Yeah, Christy.
I just was going to say what Bridget said when she lay down. She had to like take a few minutes to settle in, and it made me think about. And I just wanted to ask, what your thoughts are here. How lying down sometimes, though, can be like a vulnerable position. So in my setting, one of the things that can cause the kids a lot of distress is just having to lay down onto the operating table. So I don't know, that just resonated with me.
Glad you mentioned it. And so that so what you described about your particular the particular community you work with, and the idea of lying down, our brain coupling that experience with, I lie down when I feel I'm not safe because I'm sick and then I might be in pain. So this is why United We Home exists the way that it does. Side note, everybody has to serve back a community that they deeply understand, because this is where like there is no one size fits all understanding of how this is trauma responsive. So that would be a beautiful thing, for if like, well, this feels good to me, but I feel like this might bring up something. It's no good. In trauma responsive work, we have to remember that like there's no shape of the body that doesn't have to traumind somebody. Any can be a traumminder. So I think being aware of offering choice is really, really important. So you could always offer that somebody could sit, or they could lie down if they felt like it, or they could stand up. In trauma responsive work, choice is number one, because remember, the traumatic event was perceived to be out of control, unstoppable, and unexpected. And in its very nature, it removes our choice, is what that leads to. And so a lot of us can carry with us a feeling that we don't have choice. And then when we're in situations where people don't offer us choice, it reaffirms that I don't have choice and I'm out of control and there's nothing that I can do. So anytime we can offer choice is really great. Yeah. And for a lot of people who experienced childhood trauma, and that's a large part of our population, the feeling of people being above us, of us being physically smaller, it's one of the things that helps the body decide, am I going to pull the emergency brake, or am I going to put the gas pedal, let the brake off and put the gas pedal down? And most children, their bodies pull the emergency brake, because it's what our body does if we perceive that we are so small compared to the threat that there is no chance of us fighting or escaping. So if you know that you have that experience, or if that comes up for you or somebody else, that could be another reason why laying down can be uncomfortable. And then Elisa?
So,
Bo.
yeah, no, it's fine. I knew. Yeah, so it's interesting about the, like, you said, like, the certain, like, pitches of sounds, because, like, I could meditate with people hitting hammers and, like, my roommate talking all day, but as soon as, like, a dog barks, it, like, activates something in my head, and that kind of happened, I noticed, because the dogs are playing with my partner out there, and they, like, broke some glass or something, and I felt myself kind of come out of it. And didn't even realize it, though, until afterwards. But my question was about the breathing, and the vocal cords. Like, when you say you're activating or, like, exhaling out through the mouth, is it like a ha, or is there actual, like, vibration of a, like, kind of thing? Because I don't know if you know anything about like false chords or like throat singing, but I find like activating those to be very soothing. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about, or yeah.
Yes. So in yoga, the ujjayi breath, the when we hug our vocal cords together is what we just did. But I have making sound also, which we could all try now together, which is almost like doubly effective. Singing, chanting, making any sound, it vibrates the vocal cords, which stimulates the vagal nerve, which helps regulate our nervous system. Also, when we sing or chant or make a sound, it naturally lengthens our exhale. just by the nature of our vocal cords moving closer, it lets less air out. And so it lengthens our exhale quite a bit. And it also, the sound, when we make an out loud sound, it vibrates portions of our inner ear that are also related to the vagal nerve and our sense of safety and our brain. So let's all try, and do me a favor, Bo, if you'll leave yourself unmuted, and I'm gonna volunteer Morgan because I know I can volunteer her to unmute herself. She can be mad at me later. And so let's all just notice what happens when we make some sound. So we were talking about Dorothy finding our way home in the Yoga Sutras, our highest wisdom, our highest intuition. It all comes from our heart. So that's where we're heading anyway. So maybe you'd like to bring your hands in an open gesture over your heart. And then maybe we'll just experience the bija sound of the heart and the first sound in the sound of out. So really, really gently, we'll let our breath flow in. Exhale, can let that go. I mean, the other day, Jenny, sometimes I miss practicing with you, because when I used to teach asana classes outside of we were just always making sound. But you can feel right away the vibration. It's your nervous system, it's your parasympathetic nervous system responding to the vibration and feeling it regulate yourself back into coherence. So anytime you can integrate sound right now for yourself or anybody else, really good. Thank you, Morgan and Bo, for being my voices with me. All right. So I think the really important thing, just to walk back, is we have to start with the body, because we disassociate from it when we have a lot of stress or we have a traumatic response. So we have to come back to the body, even if it's just a meditation practice. We got to get to the body first, and then all of our movement should be linked to our slow, smooth, easy breath with a relaxed muscles, so that our belly's relaxed, we're diaphragmatically breathing, and our exhales are slightly longer. So next is thought patterns. I know we have a lot left to go, but it's okay. We'll just get to what's essential. So I think what's really essential about the next layer of ourselves, which is, Manomaya Kosha, our thought patterns, our emotions, and really when we talk about trauma, this is the layer of us where so much of our traumatic experience lives, because we know from yoga and Buddhism, what pulls us out of the experience of yoga, which is when we feel safe, because we're fully immersed in ourselves with our body, our breath, everything in the present moment. What pulls us out of that a lot of the time are our thoughts. And every time we have a thought, parts of our brain, its job is to take that thought and then compartmentalize it with another thought and attach an emotion to it. And then we really spend our whole day doing those exercises. What are they called? Where you somebody says a word and then you association, and they associate this memory, that memory, this thing. So therefore, I feel this way. Blah blah blah. The other thing about it that's very important with trauma, though, is that taking that is the quality of our unharnessed mind. We are also humans, the only species that can put ourselves into a traumatic response with thought alone. So that is to say that the gazelle cannot think its way into a traumatic response, but we can. So you can just be sitting here with me right now. I can be sitting here with you right now, and I can hear a sound or hear a word, and my brain can associate that with the event that was traumatic for me. And before I know it, my heart is racing, my breath is shallow, my muscles tense, I'm dumped full of cortisone and adrenaline, and I am back in my traumatic response in real time, and I'm sitting in my living room. So this is a really important thing for us to remember about the mind, and right now, the mind. The other thing that causes some of the most stress, in the Heart Math book, he talks about being asked to change tasks many, 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 many times throughout the day, and how that's one of the things that is very likely to take us out of coherence with ourselves. And I feel like we're all at home and somebody's working, and then we have the people and the children and the job and the news and the email and all of that. It's like, to me, in my Dorothy analogy, thoughts and the emotions and reactions attached to them are the flying monkeys. And I think it's a really great symbolism that the monkeys actually like physically pick her up and like take her physically like off of her path. It's that strong. We physically affect ourselves with our thoughts, emotions, and reactions. So the other thing that's really interesting in a stress response and a traumatic response is that it leads to, when our sympathetic nervous system is leading the show and our parasympathetic nervous system it's not tapping the brake, it's sitting back, it actually leads to overactivity in the part of our brain that processes fears and emotions, like our amygdala and our hippocampus. So we tend to, during a stress response or a traumatic response, we feel more emotion, we feel it more strongly, and we feel it more constantly. And this is where we get like mood swings from traumatic response or strong stress response. So body awareness and the kind of breathing that we just practiced are two things we can do to start to help bring ourselves back into regulation. But if our mind is all over the place, then all it takes is one thought to put ourselves back into traumatic response or stress response. So now more than ever, I feel it's really important that inside of our practice, whatever that practice is, even if that's child's pose, even if that's downward dog, even if that's walking, whatever it is, we have to be we need to be strongly aware of what we are focusing our thoughts on. There's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of depression. General anxiety disorder and depression, panic disorder are all things that branch off from prolonged stress response and traumatic response. And all of these have in common with what we just discussed, which is rumination over and over again, the same thoughts with a negative connotation, fear, worry, all of those things. So I recommend strongly mantra practice right now, because in my own meditation practice, I have really had a difficult challenge with my own mind, practicing what I usually practice, which is kind of like open awareness, which would be more like dharana, more meditation in that way. I find I really need a little dhyana in my life. I need a point of focus. And in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali is very clear. Point of focus can be anything you want. It doesn't have to be this word, that place, anything. It's I wish I had the number in front of me. The point of meditation can be anything you want. Let's add to that, it should be positive, because our brains are already trying to figure out, like, am I not safe? Am I not safe? I'm worried. I'm afraid. Should I go there? I could be in danger. We don't need any more of that. So really simple mantra that I like to add in to everything I do, including my physical practice, and we can all try it here together if we like, is on the inhale, I hear the words, I am. And on the exhale, I allow a word silently to circulate through my body of something that I want to bring into the forefront of my experience. And so the way that I practice asana always, but particularly right now, or you could start a meditation practice this way, and then like in the Yoga Sutras, the teaching is, we start with single pointed focus, and that opens the gateway to the open awareness. So we can start, and then that can open a door. Is when you inhale, you can try it if you like, you just hear the words, I am. And as you exhale, you hear that word of what it is that you're bringing to the forefront. You can just practice that a few times. Sometimes it could be, I am opening to, or I am inviting, or anything that feels right. And noticing on even a really cellular level what it feels like to embody that bhav, that feeling of that word right now. Like you can allow it to change the way the movement of your body feels even. You can exhale and let that go. So I think this is a really, really good tool. When we don't have something to do with our mind during our asana practice, a lot of the time it does really unhealthy things, like compare ourselves to other people, say negative things about ourselves, set goals that don't exist in yoga and things like that. So anytime you can offer single pointed focus, whether it's sensation in the body, words, anything like that, I would keep that going with yourself like throughout. And you feel the door open to open awareness, like walk through. And then if a thought comes and that door closes, like just come back to your single pointed awareness. All right. 7 minutes left. Okay. All right, if we just get down to the last two ideas that I think are most important, they would be that the inner two layers of ourselves are our intuition and our wisdom. And when we can find ourselves in safety in our bodies, and we can allow ourselves to feel that energy of our breath, of ourselves in our coherent state, and we can bring our minds to a single pointed focus, then that's when we access our wisdom and our intuition. And this is where this idea of awareness and interoception comes into play, which is this idea that when we notice sensations in the body, when we receive a beautiful description of wisdom that I read was knowledge that's received from within and not from a teacher or a book. And that's a really amazing gift. That's, I think, what I want to share about this intuitive layer in ourselves is I feel like a lot of us are in a place of doing right now. I need to do this and I need to do that. And now I need to do this and I have to change that and I have to do this. And I think for those of us that feel, and I'm there, in this kind of like sea of doingness, getting to that intuitive part of ourselves is when we receive the knowing about like what it is we should take action on. Because when we just act, and we lose the tether between our actions and our own state of wellness and what that's creating, when we allow ourselves to make decisions about like what to do and how to do it, that's the state that it comes from. The thing I want to mention about awareness is that an interoception, sensing the sensations inside of our body. Anytime we're sensing sensations in our body, that's traveling up the vagus nerve into the brain. And what's really interesting is that we never really naturally sense raw data sensations. We always receive them in our brain coupled with thoughts, memories, and emotions. It's what our brain does. So all day, every day, sensations from our body are coming up into our brain, and our brain is coupling them with like, yes, this feeling was from this time. That means it's this, and I should feel this way. I want to mention that right now, there are times where it won't be helpful for people to rest their awareness on certain somatic sensations inside their body. And one of those is going to be the breath right away. Because the nature of just notice our breath now is received in our brain with like, my breath is short, maybe I can't catch my breath, oh this, oh that, and all this. Like, there's a lot around that. So when you help people bring awareness into their body sensations, I would just think about choosing a body sensation that is very neutral to begin with. Like, you can feel temperature on fingers and toes. There's a lot of things that you can explore in your own practice, but I wouldn't go straight for notice the sensation of the breath, because that would have a tendency right now to bring other things along with it. And then we can walk to noticing the breath once we've kind of regulated ourselves into a place where we've already practiced feeling without thought, noticing any thoughts and emotions that arise, anything that comes up when you feel the temperature of your fingers, just feeling the temperature of your fingers. And we can walk our way to just noticing our breath again without it coming along with all this other stuff from our brain. And the last thing I want to say, in these just very few minutes, but it's the most important thing, I think, is the very center of ourselves is our heart's wisdom. It's who we really are. It's beings that are built for connection and bonding and love. And I think that in our Wizard of Oz analogy, the beautiful thing about it is that all the beings already had everything that they felt they were lacking, and that the wizard was a sham. That what allowed them to reconnect to their courage and their love and their wisdom was being in service to each other. And that really speaks for me right now. That's karma yoga. Being in the work of loving and caring for ourselves and the people around us. And when we can't unlock our hearts caring for ourselves, we can unlock our hearts caring for others. And so in this last moment, I invite you to be in any physical shape that you feel. You can bring your hands over your heart again. There's a teaching that wherever we feel the touch of our hands, that's where our mind goes, our attention goes. And invite into your heart somebody that you would love to send a healing message to. And don't think it with your mind, let them rise out of your heart. And as you breathe in smoothly and slowly, and as you breathe out, you can send them the words with your mind and your heart. May you be happy. May you be free. May you be happy. May you be free. And as you feel any sensation that you may feel, perhaps around your heart, remembering that the energy field of our heart is 60 times greater than that of our brain, and that it can touch, and yes, it can touch others in an 8-foot radius. So physical distancing be damned. Our heart flying past that 6 feet. But this is something that we can offer always, all the time, to each other. The teaching of yoga is we travel home to our hearts, because only when we are home in our hearts can we help others find the way to theirs. So I thank you all so much for being with me for this time. I thank you for all the moments that you will move from your heart and touch other people in this world. All right. More to come. My battery's at 5%, which is the universe's way of saying namaste, Jenny. I know it's a lot, so you have my email address. I emailed you from my email address earlier, and just know that this is what I feel like the work that is my purpose for the last 5 years. It is so now. So if anybody ever had any questions or anything they wanted to unpack or talk about, please just email me. And I'm here for you in any way that I can be of service. And I love you. And here, maybe we can leave with this. It's a Native American mudra that I learned from my training with Shiva long time ago. I wish I had my notebook. It's not with me. I'm away from home. They bring one hand to their hearts and they open the palm of the other hand. And it's a way of expressing that when we're in our hearts, we have no fear. Showing the palm is a way of showing that you're not afraid and that you feel safe. And we can all share that with each other. All right, take that with you. I love you. Take my love with you. And have a beautiful afternoon. We'll find our way down the yellow brick road. I know it. I love you all. Bye-bye.